Good afternoon. Today is Monday, the 1st of December 2025, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. Delighted to have Ben Rubin with me in the studio.
Delighted to have you back, Brian.
We'll also be joined by Sandi Adams and Diane Rasmussen via video link. Now, we've got a pretty busy news for you today. We'll be running slightly over the hour, but lots of important information to get across. Many people will be unaware that a state of emergency has been declared in UK, and we'll be having a look at that. We're going to be looking at gender and climate, because the two are apparently intimately connected. We're going to be having a look at possible war crimes with the SAS. We're going to be looking at local councils and the use of drones. We're going to be looking at climate leadership. We're going to be looking at the whiteness pandemic. You may be completely unaware that that was taking place, but it is. We're going to be taking a little bit of a recap look at juries and the intention to scrap juries. And we'll be ending with a look at the farmers' protests up in London and some fighting nuns, Ben. We need more of them.
Yes.
Well, let's kick off straight away. Tell us about this national emergency.
Absolutely, Brian. Yes, hello, everybody. It is a state of emergency. Apparently, it all centres around this. The national emergency briefing took place last Thursday, 27th of November in Westminster Hall, where 10 of the UK's leading experts briefed an invitation-only audience of politicians and media figures, celebrities, people from faith, sport and elsewhere on the latest implications for health, food, national security and the economy. Let's hear what they had to say.
Together with all the other wonderful life on Earth, we are the only known life forms in the universe. Do we want it on our conscience that we waste everything?
This event is about resetting the national conversation, especially in the face of growing misinformation.
It's sobering when you realise that this is the least extreme climate you will experience in your lifetime.
Competition for water, food and land is rising.
I am scared. I'm 63. I may not have that much longer left on the planet, but I'm scared for my own life and future, and I'm absolutely terrified for that of my son.
We have seen this before. We saw it with the tobacco industry lobbying against the science, and it is happening here too.
We might be a small country, but we are a great country. And I can see some great people out here, a lot of good people. But the world will be lost by a lot of good people doing nothing. So we need action. Hope comes from action.
Think of all the good people we could have helped if we had acted earlier. And we can't go back, but we can avoid making the same mistake twice by acting now.
The solutions make us stronger.
Hope is a discipline. It needs human endeavour to make it a reality. Between us all, together, we have what it takes to create the societal tipping point that we so badly need to unlock full-scale action for the first time.
Ben, that was truly awful. I have to say, truly awful. So he's 63 and he's terrified. I'm 70 and I'm absolutely not terrified, except of deranged people like this. This is just absolutely incredible that this country's got in the state it has.
I know.
We need to call these people out.
They're really hamming it up, aren't they? The great and the good gathering together in Westminster Hall to talk about fighting back against disinformation and all of the terrible things of the world. And it's all kind of, the way it's presented, it's kind of black and dark and bleak and foreboding. And it's all led out by this guy, Chris Packham, who has a CBE. I only found this out when I was looking at this over the past couple of days. So he's one of the top people in the British establishment leading this thing out in Westminster Hall, in the seat of power. And it's all a little bit Big Brother, isn't it? It's a bit ingsoc. Look at that. The colours, the presentation. I mean, it's not very subtle.
No.
This is a big propaganda push. So Packham's at the forefront. They've got 10 experts threats from nature and food security and climate and national security. So they got a former lieutenant general there. So obviously got to get the army involved because this is now a national security issue. And then people talking about economics, health, extreme weather. It's chaired by Mike Berners-Lee, who's Tim Berners-Lee's brother, is the lesser-known Berners-Lee. Tim Berners-Lee obviously invented the internet. And they're talking to quite a substantial bunch of people, actually. So there were a bunch of celebs there, faith figures. Jarvis Cocker was there. And then also this guy, I don't know if you noticed this in the film, they actually said, when he said great people, it cut to that fella. Do you know who that is, Brian?
I'm afraid I don't.
Is that
you
okay?
tell me. You tell me. I probably should do.
It's Zach Polanski.
Right.
So I think, well, they're going to pose the question, yeah, because in this big propaganda exercise where the world's coming to an end and it cuts in the video to say that there are some great people out there and it goes directly to Zach Polanski, has he been chosen? Is this our new chosen political leader? Well, certainly for the younger generation he hears, this is the person leading out the conversation around eco-populism and putting a nice, shiny, happy face on communism, basically. That's the game that they're playing with Polanski and what's going on in the general discourse at the moment. And actually, he delivered a few words of his own about what he saw at the event, which we can have a little listen to now.
I think this is probably the biggest piece of information I'd want anyone to take away from today. Taking action is not a sacrifice. It's not even a problem. Taking action is the opportunity here. There are so many wins here for any government around the creation of jobs, around the creation of warm, affordable homes, cleaner air, better walking and cycling, and also bringing communities together. We are seeing the rise of fascism in this country, and I don't think that's hyperbole. And far too often, that's because people feel politics is being done to them rather than with them. What we heard over and over in the briefing today was more and more ways that politics can be done with communities, where people can be at the heart of co-design, and also we can improve both people's lives and the climate crisis and the nature emergency. How is that not worth doing? The first action I hope any elected politician will take is to talk about this more, to make sure that when we talk about it, we are always talking about it in terms of opportunities, that yes, there is a threat, that it is an emergency, we need to be really clear about that. But actually, if we act now, there are ways we can turn this around and actually make sure we're investing in our communities. If we don't act now, there won't be opportunities because we will just be struggling to survive. The choice here is quite stark, and it's really important that all of us make the right choice.
Benny's talking about fascism. He's part of it. Green fascism is what we're talking about. This is a fascistic movement. It's coloured green.
I could not agree more. And he is the propaganda mouthpiece of choice at the moment. What did he say there? It's not just a climate crisis, it's also a nature emergency. And then he slips in there that we're going to create loads of new jobs, which are all going to be funded through extravagant borrowing. He was actually talking about tripling the public debt last week, saying this is a great way for us to rebuild the economy is by going to borrow a load of money from the banks. Craziness. The fact that walking and cycling is a good thing, i.e. you're not going to be able to drive. He talked about co-design, so that these deliberative processes, pseudo-democratic processes that they want to introduce. And they're positioning it as a World War II level mobilisation, and they want to have a full public briefing across all of the national broadcast networks, and that's what this organisation is pushing for. It's already begun to gain traction, so we can see here there's a few pieces of media coverage. This was shared on LinkedIn by a lady called Bianca Pitt. You can see on the right-hand side there, she's co-founder of something called She Changes Climate. Diane's going to talk about this a bit more, this kind of intertwining of gender and climate issues, and she's also tagged this person below, Sandrine Dixon de Cleve from the Club of Rome, various BBC journalists, right? So this is absolutely top-tier propaganda, globalist propaganda around climate change. You can see what they're going. I mean, we've already been subjected to the messaging around this, but look at the image here. You know, everything bad around the world is being presented in the context of total breakdown of society. And who's behind this? So it's the science, basically. So we've got a bunch of NGOs and academic organisations, and the one that really caught my eye actually was one at the bottom in the centre there, the Climate Reality Project, which is Al Gore, and he set that up with the money that he made from the film Inconvenient Truth, which came out in the early 2000s, in which I seem to remember him predicting that New York would be underwater by 2020, which it isn't, which is probably quite inconvenient for their entire narrative. But anyway, this is going to continue and they're going to keep on amping it up. So watch this space.
Watch this space. So, Diane, welcome to today's news and take us into climate and gender, if you can believe such a thing.
Yes, thanks, Brian. And hello, everyone. It's great to be here today. I want to start first with a very local story that was just released a couple of days ago, both in the BBC and other mainstream outlets. This is a man. His name is Ryan, and he was actually recently convicted and tried under the charges of molestation of a girl when she was 13 years old. This was held at Newcastle Crown Court. He is being held in a man's prison at HMP Durham, waiting to see where he's going to end up from here out, because he will be spending a few years in prison. The interesting thing about this story, which is the case with all of these stories that are coming out recently, is that this man has decided to put on makeup and a dress and call himself Natalie Wolf. And his/her pronouns were respected. So being called a woman while he was in court, so in the court documents as well as in the media. Now, I want to say that this relates because of the issues with gender and all of the confusion that they're putting in front of us to make us understand, who would be against violence against women and who would be against, of course, misgendering, of course, because that is also not inclusive at all whatsoever. So if we go into what I saw on Facebook a few days ago from the UN, and I posted this on my Facebook page, and I had a lot of interesting comments thank you to all the UK column members who responded to this. The UN Environment Programme reported on the 25th of November on Facebook that, quote, climate change affects us all, but its impacts are not equal. As temperatures rise, existing vulnerabilities deepen, increasing the risks of gender-based violence facing women and girls. Research shows that every 1 degree Celsius increase in global temperature is associated with a 4.7% rise in intimate partner violence. So apparently, as we experience global boiling, there will be more intimate partner violence. And they talked about the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. So, of course, no decent person would be against fighting against violence against women, of course. What I was really interested in is how they made this connection between the increase in the temperature and intimate partner violence. So they have this report on the UN website called the Spotlight Initiative report from a couple of years ago. Actually, this was a few months ago, I believe. Talking about how the climate crisis fuels gender-based violence. And so within this report, we see this enlightening infographic saying that these increases in partner violence are linked to extreme weather events, including droughts, floods, and storms. So I followed through the citations to see what they were actually citing and where they got this from. So I found a couple of academic papers that were cited in the report. The first one here is from JAMA Psychiatry, and this is all about low and middle income South Asian countries. So not exactly generalizable to the entire planet, of course, because it is already warm in South Asia, and we can't make any sort of relationships to anywhere else around the world where this is already going to be a warm environment compared to the UK or other places. It also cited a paper from 2023 in the Scottish Journal of Political Economy called Temperature and Intimate Partner Violence. This was looking at developing countries, 34 of them, and saying that an increase in temperature raises the risk of intimate partner violence, saying these could be attributable to the loss of control proxied by alcohol use and worse labor market outcomes. So, of course, alcohol use is not really related to climate, as far as I know, and neither are labor market outcomes. So I'm not really sure how that relates to the environment. But related to this, if we go back to COP30, which, as we've covered previously, it was not a success this year at COP30 at all. But they announced that there was going to be this gender action plan. There have been previous gender action plans from the UN. This one is all about climate agenda and climate crisis, and especially how this impacts women and girls. And if we go into the documentation supporting COP30's climate change and gender action plan, it says, this quote from this former UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Mary Robinson, said, quote, climate change is a man-made problem that requires a feminist solution. So there's some gendered language there for you. So apparently the feminists need to go fix this man-made problem. So you men are apparently the problem. And you see this again from the UN Women saying feminist climate justice framework for action. So we have to take a feminist approach to get justice for the climate. If we look at the actual gender action plan, it says specifically talking about women in sort of communities around the world, especially in particular recognizing the contribution of women and girls of African descent to climate action. So that would not include me or anyone native to countries that are not African. So let's take a video. There was a video, a short clip here of some women who were fighting for climate justice just in the past couple of weeks. Let's see what happened in this inspiring video.
Do we want climate justice? When do we want it? Now! Climate justice demands gender justice, not as a side note, but as a foundation. When women and diverse group of people lead, our communities thrive. This is not theory, this is evidence. We are here to demand parties in the corridors, to demand governments that the gender action plan must be bold, that the gender action plan must honor the weight of these baskets. And the forest and the God, mind the God.
So we're seeing that, but we're also seeing, as reported by The Guardian and other mainstream sources leading up to COP30 and during COP30, that there are issues with the definition of gender. So they're calling so-called conservative states, such as Saudi Arabia and Iran, are getting in the way of this particular bit of progress, because they're saying that we can no longer talk about women as actual biological women. We have to include trans women and so on, which brings me back to the beginning of that segment about the man who's just been convicted of child sexual abuse. So, Brian, I think there's a lot of confusion going on that they're using to push the climate agenda. As Ben also showed in the first segment, this contributes to this national emergency that we are all apparently facing, Brian.
Diane, thank you very much for that. Clearly, we'll be talking about this subject more in extra time because it's so incredible, but we can see people severely reframed in their belief system. And we've got utter madness unfolding. This is an attack both on women and men in this world, and it's got to be called out for what it is, a psychological attack. It's deliberate, it's calculated, and this is not nonsense. We know many people in the UK column audience look at this sort of material and say, this is utterly ridiculous, it's complete nonsense. Well, it may be both those things, but it's also incredibly dangerous. So we need to call it out for what it is. Now, let's move from some of that nonsense to the fact that the SAS are still under investigation at the moment to possible, essentially crimes on the battlefield in Afghanistan. And the BBC, very big article today, talking about SAS war crime evidence being suppressed. The inquiry has been hearing. And if we put a bit of meat on the bones, the Panorama, of course, crowing, maybe quite rightly, that it revealed that 54 detainees and unarmed men had been killed by the SAS in suspicious circumstances in a 6-month tour. It went on to say, the article went on to say that both General Carlton Smith and Lieutenant General Jonathan Page, the preceding Director of Special Forces, were named in proceedings in relation to claims they'd failed to inform the Royal Military Police of these allegations of very serious crimes. So it went on here with an individual simply called N1466, high seniority. And he told the inquiry he'd been made aware of whistleblower testimony that SAS troopers had been heard bragging during a training course about killing all fighting-age males during operations, regardless of whether they posed a threat or not. And if we go in, he also told the inquiry he first became concerned back in February 2011 after noticing that SAS reports coming back from Afghanistan showed the regiment was killing people in suspicious circumstances and in unusually high numbers, with too few enemy weapons recovered from some operations to justify the numbers of deaths. And if we go on, he also commented the duplication there. Apologies for that. So this was part of the BBC's original investigate report, that they went to one of the locations where a group of men had been killed, and what they found at the location were many bullet holes which were low down on the building walls, suggesting that the people had been shot while they were actually lying on the ground. And in some of these horrific happenings, young children, very young children who were in bed with their parents, were also killed. So the BBC digging this out, and if I just come on to this one here, two former heads of all UK Special Forces suppressed evidence, and this was told to a public inquiry in closed evidence sessions. And the point that I'm making here is that we've got very, very serious stuff coming to light, but of course the public isn't privy to everything, because under security this has to be withheld from the public. We'll be more on that particular subject a little bit later in the news. But we want to contrast the BBC's reporting of possible SAS crimes with the BBC's reporting of possible IDF crimes, which we reported on, the UK column reported on a little while ago. Now, this was in relation to a BBC report called Two Girls Shot in Gaza. And the BBC World Service pieced together the story of the two little girls, both 6, and they were killed in Gaza in separate incidents in November 2023 in areas where the Israeli Defense Forces was operating. And if we bring in a bit more on this, Leah and Amira were just 2 of more than 160 cases of children shot in the war in Gaza who the BBC had gathered information about. And essentially, the BBC reported that in 95 of these cases, the child had been shot in the head or chest. And in 59 of those, the BBC obtained testimony from eyewitnesses, either directly or via human rights organisations and medics. And the witnesses alleged that 57 of these children were shot by the IDF, and 2 were shot by Palestinians, one in celebratory gunfire and the other in a gang conflict. Now, the excellent documentary here by BBC's Stephanie Hegarty, of course, identified that very small and very, very young and therefore very small children were being shot in the head and chest. This implicated the use of IDF snipers, not for 2 girls, but for many children. And this was a fantastic report that the BBC had, but this was largely tucked away on the BBC website. So if we just pop that one back on screen, I'm just going to bring in this, because essentially we seem to have one rule for the SAS and possible war crimes and another for the IDF. We are investigating the SAS, but we are not investigating the IDF. And of course, UK is intimately involved in memorandum of understanding and partnerships, both with Israel and with the IDF forces. Now, Patrick Henningsen and myself did a specific piece looking at the BBC documentary, and we came to the end making really this statement that we strongly suggest that far from being a video documentary buried or hidden in plain sight on the BBC's website, Ms. Hegarty's work to expose a war crime in Gaza involving children should be fully acknowledged and rebroadcast internationally. Moreover, her findings should already be helping to trigger a major international backlash against IDF snipers targeting children, as well as sending out a powerful call for an end to the wider slaughter in the Middle East. And I'm going to end this segment by saying that, of course, if the SAS have carried out crimes in Afghanistan, then people need to be brought to account and brought to justice. But at the same time, if we are in bed with IDF forces who are sniping and killing children, the British government should also be calling for those IDF snipers to be brought to trial. So I think we've got a really, really serious position now when we're going to bring British military personnel, special forces, into the public arena, possibly into court as a result of crimes. But apparently Israel and the IDF are simply going to get on with killing as they think necessary, and the British government isn't going to say anything. I think this is outrageous, Ben. I'm not sure what your comments are. Yes.
One rule for them, one rule for everyone else, as they say.
Indeed. Okay, well, let's move on. And the subject, Sandi, is drones. And we've now got local authorities believing they can presumably benefit from the advances in drone technology in Ukraine to spy on the UK public. Maybe that's a bit over the top. What have you got?
Thank you, Brian, and good afternoon to you all. Yes, things are becoming distinctly dystopian in our local councils in the UK. Local authorities across Britain are assembling fleets of drones and training up staff as pilots so that it can surveil residents. More than 60 councils around the UK have staff certified to operate unmanned aerial vehicles. They call them UAVs. An additional dozen councils have been approached by the Civil Aviation Authority for guidance on drone regulations. Civil Aviation Authority data shows how city, borough and district councils have all trained up drone pilots. But the actual numbers may well be higher because records only capture those who disclose their employer-sponsored training. So the council's drone drive has sparked serious concerns over surveillance. In our next, Hammersmith and Fulham Council have been set to deploy drones as part of a 70-man strong lawful enforcement team, which issued more than 2,200 fines last year. So West London Borough of Fulham and Hammersmith plans to use these UAVs, unmanned aerial vehicles, to combat fly tipping and antisocial behaviour, despite flight restrictions from nearby Heathrow Airport and Wormwood Scrubs Prison. A report by the council found police do not have sufficient officer numbers to provide a visible deterrent in all cases, and they, in order to take the desired action. As a result, council drones and CCTV, some of which will use live AI facial recognition, can help combat crime and antisocial behaviour. Now, I think I've got a Telegraph article here from Thursday the 29th, which reports on how UK council drones spy on residents, with dozens of authorities training up pilots for these drone operations. Now, there's a company called Hired a Drone Pilot, and they have included information on their website for professional drone pilots about which drone laws apply in 2026. They seem to change every year. It's a very complicated thing. They're rushing it through, and so it's confusing regarding licensing, where you can fly, and safety guidelines. So I just want to have a look at Thurrock Council for a moment, because that's been given the power to use them to detect and prevent crime, although Tendring Council has explicitly declared it will not use any drones for surveillance footage, limiting its 3 devices to communications and marketing. Maybe they're not being as transparent as they could be, because in a document that I found from Thurrock Council, it proves that they will be used for environmental enforcement. So clearly this will be used to monitor environmental and social governance contracts and biodiversity net gain contracts and the compliance of those contracts. And it will be enforced with fines and sanctions. So Lichfield District Council used drones for police and environmental enforcement surveillance, for planning, housing, food and health safety, emergency and licensing. Now, Newcastle City Council are using this company, it's called Heli-Guy, which means, I suppose it's a mixture of helicopters and men, to train drone pilots. So we taxpayers are funding this. Does the normal person in the street actually know that this is happening? I mean, this has all come quite quickly, really. They've obviously had it undercover for quite a while, but they're beginning to announce it. Now, I've got a PDF here from Reading University, and it's called Ambition to Action, and it's published on. I've actually put it in the show notes. So, well, I put everything in the show notes, but do look at this because it really is. It's worth reading. It's really they're calling it from ambition to action. So this is how they're going to roll out this program. Now, if you haven't heard of Big Brother Watch, then do look at their website, as they're doing a great job shining a light on digital surveillance in all its forms in the UK. I've got this quote here from Jake Herford about the Met Police. He's head of research and investigations at Big Brother Watch, and he said it's concerning that potentially intrusive tech is being rolled out without any policing limiting how or when or why it might be used. On councils, he said there may be a role for drones in helping councils monitor flooding or conduct land surveys, but local authorities must not use the technology as spies in the sky. Britain is already one of the most surveilled countries on earth, with CCTV cameras on every street corner. We don't need flying cameras too. Councils must make sure that they do not use this technology for intrusive monitoring of their citizens just because it's possible. It doesn't mean it's something they should do. Herford's arguments are rooted in civil liberties concerns, mass surveillance, indiscriminate monitoring, lack of transparency or democratic oversight. So let's take a look at this video made by Big Brother Watch.
Your local council might soon be watching you from the sky. No, not a conspiracy theory. A Freedom of Information request just revealed dozens of UK councils are training staff to fly surveillance drones. And they're not just using them for pretty landscape shots. More than 60 councils already have drone pilots authorised by the Civil Aviation Authority. Another 12 councils have contacted the regulator asking about drone laws. Translation: council officers are getting aerial surveillance capability and fast, all funded by taxpayers or with barely any public discussion. Councils insist drones will tackle things like fly tipping, antisocial behaviour, planning disputes, structural surveys and coastal erosion. And sure, some of that makes sense, but the slippery part is buried in the details. Enforcement, fines and supporting law enforcement teams. That's where the line blurs. Hammersmith and Fulham wants drones to boost a 70-strong law enforcement team, already issuing thousands of fines. Some councils plan to use the AI-powered facial recognition alongside drone footage, and a few of the areas are in flight-restricted zones, meaning councils are flying drones in places the public legally can't. Well, that doesn't sound dangerous. Big Brother Watch says it outright. This risks becoming spies in the sky. Britain already has some of the heaviest CCTV surveillance in the world. Add drones, and you've got mobile cameras that can peer into gardens, windows, workplaces, or anywhere public enough to justify it. When councils say it's about safety, they actually mean we don't have enough police, so we'll surveil you ourselves. When they say it's about fly tipping, they mean new fines incoming.
Well, that just really says it how it is. Now, let's take a look at this short clip from China, and you can see where this surveillance state in the UK is headed.
We're seeing reports and footage out of China showing traffic police utilizing drone technology for aerial monitoring of roadways. Now, on one level, this is a clear example of accelerated technology adoption in the public sector. But looking deeper, it points towards a major step in enhancing public administration through tech, what could be termed the modernization of social governance. Think about it. The arc of human progress has always been intrinsically linked to advancements in science and technology. Every major technological innovation fundamentally reshapes how we live, work, and interact.
Very concerning, I think. And people, this is happening at great speed, Brian, isn't it? Anyway, back to you.
Thank you very much for that, Sandy. I think this stuff is immensely concerning, and it's the speed it's coming in without any form of proper discussion with the public as to whether the public wants it or indeed it's needed. So again, this is another subject we'll bring in to UK Columns Extra after the news today. Now, as always, a huge thank you to everybody that's supporting UK Column financially. We can only do what we do because of your financial support. So many, many thanks to everybody that is supporting us on a monthly or annual basis or with donations. But if you're listening in or watching UK Column News, we need your help to keep going and also to expand. So if you're not one of the people helping us financially, please consider getting onto the website and clicking here to support our work and to come on board and help us financially. That's really important. Now, we've got a number of things coming out. We've got Germ Warfare, Contagion of Idiocy with Todd Hayen tonight at 7 p.m. And we've also got the Silk and Steel podcast tonight at 9 p.m. Is the US pivoting to war in Latin America? That's with Ben Norton, and I'm sure that will be an absolutely fascinating discussion. Diane, we've got a couple here which I think you might like to take us through. The Ditchley Foundation.
Yes, thanks, Brian. There's 2 new articles that have been published recently in the past 2 days. So as the commissioning editor for written content, I'd like to mention them briefly. This one is by Mark Anderson. I believe he will probably be doing some future reporting when he's back next on the news. But he has here uncovered the Ditchley Foundation, which is related to the globalist organizations that he talks about, such as the Bilderbergers. But this is one that people may not have heard about, which is quite influential. So take a look at that one. And here's a new one from Professor David Miller. This is part 1 of a 2-part series on Dr. Emma Bryant, who is an academic in the UK. And he's using Emma Bryant as an example for how academics can easily be co-opted by intelligence agencies and used for nefarious purposes that they may not have intended to do otherwise. It's very revealing. And this is just an interview that I was aired last week, a podcast I did with Kelly Oliver Dougal. She interviewed me about my process of being canceled by academia and by librarianship and how I found my way here to my wonderful role with UK Column, Brian.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, UK Column regulars will know that we've been working with Jake Fern, the artist, in order to help promote his fantastic work, painting people, but also interviewing them at the same time. UK Column team were able to get up to London on Thursday evening in order to see a special event that Jake and his wife had put on. And we've got a little promotional film clip here, which not only tells our audience a lot about Jake and his fantastic work, but also tells a little bit about the story about how UK Column has come alongside Jake in order to help him do what he does and in order to help spread the word in a little bit more of a light-hearted cultural way. So let's have a look at this film clip.
Spitalfields, London. A vibrant location steeped in history. A very appropriate location for this exhibition. On show here, vibrant portraits of faces from the freedom movement, faces that have made history. All have been created by award-winning artist Jake Fern, who's otherwise known as the Righteous Brothers. And they've been showcased on his podcast, 1,000 Words. The podcast format of Jake painting his sitters in real time while having intimate conversations with them has been a resounding success.
I think it shows a different side to people's characters, and I think that's what people like about it. You've got 4 hours, so it just goes everywhere and anywhere, unexpected, and then there's pauses, and you just sit there and you know, I say it doesn't matter, we can just be silent for 15 minutes, I'll paint.
And tonight, we get to see Jake's work. Also here, some of those from the freedom movement who've sat for Jake, admiring the end result.
When I saw it, it didn't surprise me that much because Jake and I had such a great rapport. He's such a wonderful man, and his lovely wife and son were there, that it's sort of, I think that he was painting the atmosphere. I mean, most people who know me know I'm not that angelic. There are parts of me that are quite angelic, but not many.
It was quite a conversation we had. I mean, I know Jake pretty well, and we had a good old ramble chat. But probably by the end, it was 4 hours we were chatting. So by the end, I don't think either of us could put a coherent sentence together. I don't know how he does it, to be honest. It's quite astonishing. It's nice that Jake's kind of getting some recognition because he's mega talented, and it's nice to see everyone coming here and supporting him.
I smile a lot, probably more than I should do, and because what I talk about is quite deep and serious. And what I realised that he'd done is he's painted that side of me, that strong side of me that really looks into the deep dark stuff. And I thought, my goodness, that's actually quite a powerful picture of me, which I wasn't expecting, because I sometimes I don't see myself like that. But what he does is he paints your journey that that's brought you to this time, this very place in history. And I was really touched by it, actually.
Tonight was also a celebration of collaboration between 1,000 Words and UK Column. They joined forces this year, and the column is now the official broadcasting home of 1,000 Words. Two of the most powerful voices in the alternative movement, uniting to bring truth to the audience, but in different ways. One in an art studio with a brush, the other in a television studio with a microphone. Both equally powerful.
Art can express something that the intellect can't. You're trying to make sense of the world intellectually. That's a very external process. But when you're trying to make sense of the world internally, that's more of a feeling, heart-based. So I think the heart and the mind need to work together. So I think that's the relationship with UK Column, why it works so well. I think UK Column has been the mind, and now I think it's reaching out to balance that out with the heart.
What comes out in 1,000 Words podcast is the expression of the brain working in its entirety. Watching Jake paint alongside having a very articulate and in-depth conversation is absolutely amazing. But I think as we confront a world in which AI is being rammed down everybody's throats as the answer to everything, when in actual fact, of course, it's passive because people are not creating anything, I think 1,000 Words is actually a very natural extension of our core product being the news programme, because we are looking at the perhaps more prosaic sort of academic background to something, and Jake is providing the extension of what it is that we're critiquing and demonstrating how things can and, in my mind, should be done. And it's absolutely phenomenal to see these, I've seen lots of the images virtually on a screen, but to see these in the flesh, as it were, and indeed to see some of the sitters here, the resemblances are uncanny. But I think just the spirit, just the thoughts that are evoked, not just by 1,000 Words, but also the Righteous Brothers' works as well. They're so provocative and evocative. I'm sure you can pick up the buzz on the sound here this evening. It's a really electric atmosphere. It's absolutely fantastic. I am so glad that UK Column has 1,000 Words as part of its output. It's absolutely phenomenal.
The exhibition runs until the 4th of December at the Truman Gallery in Spitalfields. If you can't make it, then check out 1,000 Words exclusively on UK Column. Gemma Cooper for UK Column in London.
Great work by Jake, and also a wonderful evening and lovely people, very uplifting. Let's move on, Ben, and...
It's nice to see someone, just before we do, it's nice to see someone who can actually paint. Most modern art is just terrible, conceptual rubbish. He's actually got some real skill. Amazing.
And it's to do with people. So
it's
that
brilliant.
Makes it even more powerful.
Yeah.
So somebody means business, Ben. Who means business?
Yeah, someone does mean business. We talk a lot on the UK Column about what shall I call them? Clandestine networks of selected leaders of politics and industry and civil society, as they call it, who are reshaping society behind the scenes for the benefit of international capital and the British ruling class, in particular the royal family. Last week, we introduced you to this organisation, Forward Institute, which I framed as a kind of new common purpose type entity, which is exactly what I think it is. And I also introduced you briefly to this chap who works with Forward Institute. This is Sir Ian Cheshire. He is many things. He used to run Kingfisher Group, so like B&Q, big retailers. He's very close to the King. He is actually the chair of the King Charles III Charitable Fund. So this is Charles's personal charitable fund. He's the chair. And he's also the chair of the We Mean Business Coalition, which is hence the title of the piece. And we can talk a little bit about that more today. They are extremely close. So I think last week showed you this photo. So you can see here, there's Charles, there's Ian Cheshire just over his left shoulder as we're looking at it, with a bunch of other people, including Lord Debon at the top left there. So at the point that he was chair of the Climate Change Commission, and then also Sandrine Dixon de Clèves, president of the Club of Rome. So this is climate leadership, international. This photo was taken, I believe, around 2015 at Cambridge University, and this is part of the Corporate Leaders Group, which is itself part of this organisation, the We Mean Business Coalition, which is essentially a network of non-profit organisations. They love to get that in there. These are all non-profit, but they're non-profits that just so happen to be creating a multi-trillion-dollar global marketplace in climate technologies for the benefit of the people who also control the non-profits. It's generally what you see happening in this space. But let me allow the coalition to introduce itself briefly. We've got a short video clip for you.
Now is the time for every business to steer a course to a zero-emissions future. From small family businesses to the biggest multinationals, We Mean Business Coalition and its partners have helped thousands of companies take vital climate action. The 4 A's of climate leadership is the ultimate step-by-step guide, so your business can respond to the climate crisis with ambition, deliver on that ambition with action, secure wider change through advocacy, drive progress by demonstrating accountability. The resources and case studies are updated as companies learn and share their progress. Your business's future lies in a climate-resilient transformation to keep up with a changing economy, to reduce supply chain risks, and deliver for customers, employees, and the bottom line. This is climate and business critical. Get into the 4 A's of climate leadership, your compass for credible corporate climate action.
Climate action, targeted at corporate leadership. What were you going to say, Brian? You're feeling inspired
I was just
by that?
smiling at it. Somebody commented the plonky plonk music, which is always part of the indoctrination, but climate leadership, climate.
Yeah, exactly. And very just clarity around messaging and modelling behaviours and essentially directing. This is a global CEO and board level audience that this is being targeted at, and it's about getting them to behave in a very specific way, and importantly to comply, right? This is all about compliance and reporting and using that as a way to direct this global transition process that we're moving through. And I'll explain a bit more about that as we go along. So as ever, this is a public-private partnership, which is essentially a fascist system. We can get this up on screen. We can see business and policy, business, private, policy, public, yeah? So these things working in tandem with each other. They've got a theory of change, which is about collaboration between business and policy. Anyone who has a theory of change, by the way, they're on the other team. If you're watching UK Column, they're the people trying to transform the system. Theory of change, you hear it all over the place, particularly in the public sector. This is about leadership, this is about policy, this is about action, this is about collaboration across the system. There are 7 people involved in it. I'll just reference a few of them very quickly and then go slightly deeper on a couple. First one is this is BSR. So this is a network of people and ideas to accelerate the transformation process. Very similar to this one. This is Ceres, which is an advocacy group focused on North America, which is run by a former Clinton environment leader working in the White House. You've got the Climate Group, which is another lobbying network and advocacy group, very heavily involved with New York Climate Action Week. You've also got the Corporate Leaders Group. This is run out of Cambridge University, CISL, which is the Cambridge Institute for Sustainability Leadership. And that's where their photo was taken that I showed you a moment ago. Also got the B team. They're also part of this coalition I've spoken about a lot over the past year or so. That was founded back in 2012, I believe it was, by Richard Branson. Paul Pullman is involved in it, the former chief executive of Unilever. And they're very much into the B Corp movement as well. The kind of B is a consistent theme as we run through that part of the network. Then you have this thing, which is the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, which is a global network of 250 companies, and they are essentially transforming. They've set out what they call pathways for transformation, right? So you've got from energy to transportation to the food system, water, you name it. They've essentially got a template for how to transform the industry and your business as part of that industry. Right, so these are the blueprints that are being disseminated and rolled out, and that forms part of a huge toolkit. So that toolkit I just showed you is one component part of a whole kind of arsenal of these different materials, whether it's these press releases that you can issue or infographics that you can use to build the case for change or whatever it might be, that you as a chief executive can go to, and then you can present that internally, or you can use that to talk to your customers with. And that's all managed centrally through this organization, We Mean Business Coalition, and the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. A final member of the coalition is this one. This is CDP, which is the Carbon Disclosure Project. And this is all about compliance and data. It's been going for 25 years, and they have financial institutions representing a quarter of all global institutional assets. That's $60 trillion in capital. Financial institutions sitting on top of that much money, with that much money to direct towards investment in industrial transformation, are users of this system. And they also have 2/3 of global market capitalization from the market. So it's basically 2/3 of all listed companies on stock exchanges anywhere in the world are using this tool in order to report their climate performance, so that they can then track themselves against other people in industries and essentially align themselves to this technocratic agenda that's being handed down by people who are defining policies. And this is, as I say, it's been going for 25 years. And you can see how it's developed over time to include things like the introduction of the International Sustainability Standards Board, ISSB, in 2021, to introduce SEC compliance from the US, because actually a lot of this is the SEC is the Securities Commission. So a lot of this is about financial reporting. This is the elevation of the chief financial officer into the position of compliance with climate issues. They've introduced the EU taxonomy for climate regulation. You've got IFRS global accounting standards, which are being transformed again in order to drive compliance. And basically this means that accountants are now running the world. I mean, they probably already were behind the scenes, but this is really consolidating the power of the bean counters in terms of how our society is being run. As well as that kind of core coalition, there are also a bunch of strategic partners, because this is a huge global network, right? It's absolutely enormous, vast, touches on every area of the global economic system. A bunch of these we've talked about before. The Climate Pledge, that's the Jeff Bezos's thing. You've got Mission Possible Partnership. That's a bunch of the big tech companies. All of this aligned to the SDGs and that global agenda. And then there's a network around that as well. C40 cities are in there. You can see Council for Inclusive Capitalism. That's Linda Rothschild. You've got lots of UN bodies. You've got the World Economic Forum at the bottom there. And then another interesting one that jumped out at me is ISO. So that's the International Organization for Standardization. So again, this is all about making all businesses, all organisations everywhere operate from the same template and legislating to make that the case, essentially, right? This is what this organisation is up to. It's funded by, amongst other people, the IKEA Foundation. So IKEA are all over this space, playing huge amounts of money into this global transition. And behind the scenes, is kind of where we started, you got this fella pulling the strings.
We've got to cover a lot more on this. This is the power base, isn't it? And King Charles there right in the middle of those trillions of dollars to push this policy worldwide. A lot more to be said. Diane, let's bring you back on screen. And you're going to be having a look at white pandemic, which is another piece of mental reframing which unknown persons are pushing for worldwide policy.
Yeah, that's true, Brian. And I guess, back in 2020 and 2021, if they didn't try to terrify the public enough with COVID, they were also trying to warn us of a whiteness pandemic at the same time. And this is apparently an ongoing pandemic. This report was just released just last week from an organization called Defending Education. They're based in America. They are a national grassroots organization. As they say, they are working to restore schools at all levels from activists imposing harmful agendas. So I'm not sure why this was picked up now, because this paper came out a few years ago, but it's interesting because it's been picked up in a lot of different places, including in India, Australia, and here in the UK. We see this report from the Daily Mail from a few days ago with their headline saying the University of Minnesota program offers guidelines to, quote, reverse the whiteness pandemic. And this is an organization, as we said, from the University of Minnesota. What's interesting about it is that they are called the Culture and Family Life Lab. So they appear to be rooted in psychology, not in any sort of medical epidemiology. But they talk about racism being an epidemic, according to the Center for Disease Control in 2021. That can also be considered a pandemic given its large cross-national proportion and spread. And that is according to the American Psychological Association in 2020. And they said, however, there is another pandemic lurking behind and driving the racism pandemic, the whiteness pandemic. So it's like a pandemic behind a pandemic. And so it's really interesting just to see exactly how this language works out. So let's look at this paper that was cited as part of this report. The paper was published by the American Psychological Association in a journal called American Psychologist in 2021. The article was called The Whiteness Pandemic Behind the Racism Pandemic, Familial Whiteness Socialization in Minneapolis Following #George Floyd's Killing. And from the abstract, we see the end of the abstract of the article saying that collectively, color evasion and power evasion, pathogens, so there's a medical term, pathogens of the whiteness pandemic, are inexorably transmitted within families, with white parents serving as carriers to their children unless they take active preventative measures rooted in anti-racism and equity promotion. And so it talks about, if you read the impact statement from the article, which I won't go into in detail, but you can read the full article yourself, talks about the George Floyd incident, Black Lives Matter, children need to be color conscious, and parents need to be aware of this. Now, the interesting thing about this paper is that it wasn't just published. It won an award from the American Psychological Association called the George A. Miller Award for an outstanding recent article on general psychology. And the author of the paper, so this woman that I will be speaking about in just a minute, who was the first author, was expected to give an invited address at the subsequent American Psychological Association's annual convention and invited to provide a copy of the award presentation for inclusion in the Society's newsletter. So let's look at Professor Gail Ferguson's staff profile. Of course, her pronouns are she, her, hers, so that's informative. Her interests reside at the interface of development psychology, cross-cultural psychology, and clinical psychology, with a focus on understanding the implications of 21st century globalization for cultural socialization. So she's focused on children's psychology and teaching things about children. You have to ask with that last sentence, is she a globalist? But let's watch a video of her talking about the whiteness pandemic herself.
We posit that there is a whiteness pandemic behind the racism pandemic, and that this begins in the family system where young children are socialized into the culture of whiteness within white families. Our first recommendation is to remember that the whiteness pandemic is a pandemic. If you were born and raised in the United States, especially in a white family, then you've been raised in the pandemic, and you can play a role in halting and reversing this pandemic. We have two specific recommendations to that end. The first is for white parents to invest time in their own racial identity development through joining an organization like Showing Up for Racial Justice or your local BLM chapter.
So, Brian, I don't know what you think of that, but to me, it's just another form of indoctrinating children into being afraid or being ashamed of who they are, being afraid that there was another pandemic going on at the same time. And, you know, frankly, what is this doing to the minds of our children?
Utterly incredible, and so much to talk about there, and particularly when we have a look at problems that Black families are facing in America. But again, we haven't got time in today's news. We'll see what we can do in extra and in the coming weeks. Now, just very quickly, I just wanted to bring people's minds back on the fact that in UK, we've got a very serious movement to get rid of jury trials. UK Column News has already been talking about this, but we really need to keep it at the forefront of our minds. This is Parliament politics here, talking about Lammy wanting to scrap jury trials. And of course, the excuse is COVID created such a huge backlog that the only way of dealing with it is to get rid of juries, bring in AI, and get these hearings over with as soon as possible, just in front of a judge. But I just wanted to highlight here that, of course, the Leveson so-called independent review of the criminal court focuses very much, in my opinion, on the front page with the Talmud, when justice sleeps, justice is cancelled. And I think we could have a long conversation about whether we should be looking at a Christian influence to justice in this country and common law, or whether we should be heading in the direction of Leveson's Talmud, but that's probably a discussion for another time. But UK Column has covered a lot on this subject already, and in particular bias in the court system. This was from last week when I was talking with Patrick Henningsen and guest Basil Valentine, looking at how Palestine Action had been dealt with by a manipulation of the judge. He was taken off the case and a panel of 3 put in. But also, let's remember the Covert Human Intelligence Sources Criminal Conduct Bill, which came in October 2020. And this article on the UK Column website, not only saying what the bill was to do. There's no express limit within the bill on the type of criminal conduct that can be authorised. I'll read that again. There is no express limit within the bill on the type of criminal conduct that can be authorised. So this is the government giving itself and its agents the power to break the law. That being the case, Ben, I'm going to suggest there is no law. But also we want to highlight that the military were part of the agents who were to be enabled to break the law. Now, think about where we started at the beginning of today's news, talking about the SAS and possible crimes on the battlefield in Afghanistan. But under this law, it was quite acceptable for the military to actually be breaking the law. No law in the UK, therefore, how can we stand on the international stage and criticise other nations for what they do and do not do in their own countries or in their operations and involvement with other countries and overseas? Again, much to be discussed. Sandi, let's bring you in. We're going to end on positive things, so we're bringing in a lot that's wrong, but it's a fact that many people are starting to stand up and challenge the system. And tell us a bit about what the farmers were up to in London.
Well, yes, I wasn't expecting to go up on Wednesday, but I did on the request of some of the Devon and Cornwall farmers who I've been in touch with. Now, things did change in Whitehall because the plan was, and they'd been planning this with the Met Police for a couple of months, was to for the Met Police would allow them to bring their tractors into Whitehall. They were even allowed to drop 6 tons of compost outside the gates of number 10, so long as they swept it up afterwards. That was the agreement. At the last minute, the police cancelled everything and said, you can't bring your tractors into Whitehall. And they were already there. They were already in London. So what could they do? It takes a lot of cost and effort to bring tractors all the way from the West Country and all over England. Some of them had come from up north, everywhere. And so they were told they couldn't bring their tractors in. So what do they do with them? They park them in other places, in Trafalgar Square, Soho, and all around. So this is the protest really was diminished because of this decision by the Met Police, and the farmers were furious. Now I took a few shots, and this is quite an interesting banner, Rachel Thieves, because obviously it was right outside number 10 where Rachel Reeves was going to come out having announced her budget, and of course they were all there really about most of it about the inheritance tax, and there was another banner slide, and there we have when will the government act for the British public? Now this was the mood of it all really, because they're very angry, the farmers, and they've got every right to be, they were driving around with other banners about food security. And I think the next one is, that's them parked in Leicester Square because they had nowhere else to go. And unfortunately, the police then turned on them and impounded an awful lot of their tractors. So not only had they come from miles to do this, they were then sanctioned for it at great cost. So I have 3 farmers here from Dorset, and I asked them a few questions. If we could run that video, please. Very good. Where have you come from today?
We're from Dorset, West Dorset.
And are you farmers?
Yeah. Very much so, yeah.
Very much so.
Yeah, James drove his tractor up, actually, all the way, 120, 130
and they wouldn't
miles.
they stopped it at the last minute.
Well, they
didn't
thought they were going to stop us. But
oh, right.
We're already here. Yeah.
Where is your tractor?
Trafalgar Square. Yeah. Turns outside the National Gallery. Who'd have thought? People said it's difficult to park in London, but you found a spot right
You found a spot right outside the National Gallery. Well done.
Yeah.
So tell me what, I'll try and get all 3 of you in. Tell me what, obviously you hear about inheritance tax or everything else. I mean, there's a lot that's really destroying British farming, isn't there? You've got the SSI, you've got renewable energy going everywhere, people not being able to afford to keep their farms. What's the biggest issue for you here today?
Well, for me personally, it's the inheritance tax.
Yeah.
My family have been farming in Dorset for centuries. Currently 130 years at our current farm. I've got an 87-year-old mother who owns the majority of the assets on the farm, 220 dairy cows and 376 acres, and she's got £1 million allowance for inheritance tax. Well, that doesn't go very far, and so we're going to have to sell land in order to pay this really cruel tax.
Yeah, and I mean, what do you feel that do you think Rachel Reeves could stop this? And is that what you're asking for today?
Well, I think she needs to amend it. I'm all about people need to be given the time to plan their tax. I think the way around it is to have a sort of an amnesty for people that are maybe over 70 years and over, because I think the average death, the average time when people die is in their sort of late 70s, and so that 7 years is really unfair for families like us, where my mum's 87 years old with the best will in the world. She could well not make the 7 years, and we've not had enough time to plan. And you think about other families, there's farmers that are turning down cancer treatment because they know full well that if they survive past April the 1st,
this is awful.
So it's just.
And how many will commit suicide as well before April?
Beg your pardon, how many?
How many will commit suicide before April as well? I mean, there's already
a train full going to Switzerland.
Oh dear.
Why should society do that?
I know, exactly.
And it's just not a very fair tax that some people
people it won't affect, but others would get completely clobbered by it. So society should be fair. Why should we put a law like that on ourselves?
It is dreadful. It is absolutely diabolical.
Not a very
diabolical is the word. It's
Well, that's their story, and I have another two farmers, Harry and David, and they're from the West Country, talking about land use. If we could run that one.
right. It's I'm Sandi Adams from UK Column. I'm here live at Westminster, where Rachel Reeves is coming out soon with the budget, which I'm sure will be the nightmare before Christmas. So I'd like to ask you. I've got two lovely farmers here. What are your names?
David.
David and
Harry.
And Harry. Now, just tell me, I mean, it's not just about inheritance tax, is it? It's about everything that's destroying British farming. Tell me what you're coming under attack with.
Well, I think inheritance tax for us was the straw that broke the camel's back. I mean, we've had bad prices before, we've had bad governments before, but from my point of view, what affects us very badly is the inheritance tax. A lot of it is the inheritance tax.
Right.
We can, good prices, bad prices, they come and go. Government schemes come and go, but at the end of the day, if we can't afford to pay this inheritance tax without selling a farm, it's an existential threat for us, really. So that's...
Yeah. And do you think this is deliberate? Do you think farming's being destroyed deliberately?
I think there's a bigger picture here that the government would like land use for something different other than us farming. Yeah, I do agree
and
with
what,
that.
what do you think that land use could be?
Renewable energy, perhaps.
Yeah.
We're seeing it more and more housing on greenfield development sites and things like that. A lot of want for that.
Yeah.
It's all putting pressure on land use, hence driving up the value, making our asset worth more.
There's an awful lot of environmental net gain sort of sales under the radar. There's an awful lot of big companies that are wanting to free up a lot of land for environmental net gain.
And these are the big boys, the BlackRocks, the
carbon
Vanguards,
offsetting.
State
Their names becoming more and more prevalent at the moment.
It's guaranteed return, and especially to the big farms, the farms that are sort of owned by, there's a lot of farms owned by pension funds.
Yeah.
So those guys need guaranteed returns.
Yeah.
And solar farms and those sort of things will provide guaranteed returns for them. Whereas if the market is very volatile and there's a little to no return from actual arable farming or food production, it's very tempting for those boys to go, oh, well, solar farm's offering me £1,000 an acre for 40 years.
And what does that do to the food supply?
Well, it reduces it.
Exactly. And we are an island, aren't we?
We are an island.
Well, it's food for thought there. Back to you.
Food for thought, really nice people. It seems to me that we've got to help educate them to the fact that, as Ben said, while that video was running, these people are under attack in a very serious way, but they haven't quite caught on to it. But more of that in extra. Take us to the end of the news, Ben, because we're short of time.
Okay, so just a quick thank you to the good people of Stroud. Sandi and I had a fantastic trip up there on Saturday, and you can see a picture here of me speaking to the wonderful people at Project Libertas. There's about 100 people there. I was talking about wealth inequality and how to fix it. Sandi was talking about agentic AI and how utterly evil all of this stuff is. And it was a great event, brilliant people, some UK column regulars, particularly there in the front row. A fantastic use of an old convent, actually. That building was beautiful, absolutely beautiful. I'd just like to say thank you to Jane, Rhonda, Jono, Janet, and Radic, and everyone else that we met. And here's to many more. So well done, everybody. And talking of good uses for old convents, I just wanted to finish on this story, which is just fantastic. So we've got some rebel nuns. I think Brian said fighting nuns earlier, but maybe they are fighting, I don't know. But they're certainly rebelling. And these are three octogenarians, let's bring them up, Bernadette, Regina, and Rita, who broke back into their old home of Goldenstein Castle in Elsbethen in Austria in September in defiance of their spiritual superiors who had turfed them out and tried to put them into a Catholic care home. They've been helped by the local community, and they're in defiance of this guy. This is Provost Marcus Grazel, who is repeatedly accusing them of breaking their vows of obedience, and they're saying we haven't broken our vows of obedience and we're just going to do what we want to do and we're going to live here. And why not? Because look at that place. That's what they've broken back into, and they've been allowed to stay, but only on the proviso they stay off social media. So my commitment to them, which I haven't run past the management, but I'm sure it's going to be absolutely fine, is that all three of them are going to get lifetime subscriptions to UK Column, and we want them on the forums as soon as possible.
Indeed, they're clearly saying they're having none of the nonsense.
Whoa!
We must end there. Thank you very much to everybody that's joined UK Column News today. Extended news because of the important things going on. If you're a member, paid-up member of UK Column, you can join us in a few minutes in UK Column Extra. I'd like to say thank you to you, Ben. Thank you to Diane and Sandi. Let's have a pause of 5 minutes. And we'll be into UK Column Extra. For people watching the news, thank you for joining us, and we'll be back at the same time on Wednesday. See you then. Bye-bye.